Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Snowfall News. Sorry about the break from last week there, but we're back again with another episode. This week I got some more stories for you guys, but of course I got some housekeeping to get up with, announcing stories that didn't make the cut or were announced right as I was finishing up editing my script. So one of the first things we have is the Steam Machine, actually. If you don't know, the Steam Machine is Valve's proprietary console. It still works like a PC for the most part. It has the Steam OS on it, and you can install your own OS on it, and you can use your mouse and keyboard. It's kind of like a step up from a console into the PC realm. At least that's the way that Valve is kind of positioning it. It's been kind of hyped up for a bit, but it seems it has come out, and while people seem to like it, there are some issues with things like the power of the console. It's a little weaker than the current consoles out right now, and not only that, it's also quite a bit more expensive, coming in at $1,045, which, yeah, that's almost like $500 more than a PS5, while also being around the same specs. That kind of put a damper in things because of the price of RAM, and some of the other PC components have gotten hiked up due to things like AI. That has led to problems with pricing. So I don't know how this will really fit into the market. I think right now they might have to start adjusting prices as the price of components go down. But yeah, that kind of put a damper on things, especially when this is supposed to be kind of a real big moment in the industry. I can't help but wonder if maybe Valve might end up replacing Microsoft at some point, maybe within the console generation, right? Offering this sort of console PC alternative. I know that Xbox is doing that next generation, but Valve seems to have like a head start in it. And I wonder if they might try to really sort of bully their way into the console market this way. But yeah, I just want to mention that real quick. Now with that out of the way, we're going to continue on into the news, guys. So first up, the continued struggle of Xbox. Speaking of Xbox here. So for the past year or so, it's been pretty clear that Xbox has been at a loss when it comes to not just the past few generations, but the current one. And going into the future, the reasons for this are many, but a lack of clear vision and constantly changing leadership has led the brand down a road that has been very hard to salvage into something that's even reasonably profitable. As a result, multiple studios that were under the wing of Microsoft have had their doors shuttered, and it seems that this is ongoing, as in this past week, even more studios are fighting to survive and prevent such a fate. One such studio is Ninja Theory, the English studio that was behind the Senua series, which prided itself on being able to develop games on the same graphical fidelity as the biggest AAA games, but only with a fraction of the budget. While the gameplay side of them might not have been the craziest thing to bless the gaming realm, they still in the end had managed to find their niche and had an audience interested in them to prompt multiple sequels. In fact, it was only a week ago that the studio had announced they'd be making a brand new game in the series for 2027, only for Microsoft to come in and derail some of those plans. Of course, it's not just them in this situation, but multiple others like Double Fine and Compulsion Games, the former of which had developed the Psychonaut series, which still has a dedicated cult following to this day. Many of these studios have the opportunity to try to buy themselves out of Microsoft, but this will most certainly come with casualties to their workforce in the form of layoffs, which makes this whole ordeal even more stressful, no doubt, for the developers who are working there right now. Again, this is unfortunately a very common trend for Microsoft, where games may perform quite well, but not well enough to make up for the slowly sinking ship that has been the Xbox brand. Largely, this is coming from what the new CEO of Xbox, Asha Sharma, is describing as a reset, which they can fix some of the overextension the company has had in its acquisitions and partners. In fact, some of you may remember an incredibly similar situation that's happening with the developers of Hi-Fi Rush, Tango Gameworks, a title that by all accounts was a critical success within the gaming community, but still ends up receiving the axe by Microsoft and to be bought back from the tech giant. Honestly, between this and the recent struggles of Bungie, it's almost sad to see how both of the console manufacturers continue to struggle with keeping their first-party studios' doors open. It's especially telling as just last week in the Nintendo Direct, multiple Nintendo studios are still pumping out games on not only a consistent basis, but to mass success in both sales and critical reception. Indeed, Monolith Soft and Xenoblade series are getting their 5th game at this point, while many of the studios by Sony and Microsoft struggle to even get one before being offered as the sacrificial lamb to save the console. Hopefully, these studios are able to find a way forward, as it's a shame to see such talent completely squandered away in this fashion. Next, Capcom's recent success without the Auteur. For a while there, I would certainly feel that Capcom had largely been struggling to regain their footing after a number of failed products. While the games by no means sold horrendously, they were nowhere near the heights they had managed to reach in the past. But that's changed these days, where after Monster Hunter World, they've continued to make critical and commercial successes one after another, to the point that I, and many others, lovingly refer to them as Cap God. In an interview with Famitsu, where the company was celebrating their 43rd anniversary, President Haruhiro Sugimoto had commented on their beginnings and how they had got to this point now. One particular point he had stated was that Capcom had largely changed their development styles from being heavily auteur-focused to one that had a much bigger emphasis on the team as a whole. Quote, "In the game industry, when a title becomes a series, it often ends up depending heavily on a particular developer, becoming what you'd call an individual-driven title. If that person doesn't make one, there's no next installment. The direction of the series becomes tied to the ideas of a single creator." End quote. To counter this, they gathered all the main creators behind their projects, and after discussions with them, came up with the plan to rebuild their core franchises from the ground up. This has allowed not only more frequent releases from the company, but has also allowed the future of these IPs to be much more solid, as any single developer leaving won't spell the end of the franchise. There is certainly no arguing against this approach, as old and new IPs have continued to perform extremely well, and there's room for even more of their old catalog to find new life under this new style. It's a dichotomy that has existed in the gaming space for quite some time, but I would actually say in most instances, games actually aren't quite as creator-driven in this sense. Sure, you might be able to name a handful of different people who have this style, but for the vast majority of games and series out there, the credit is usually attributed to the team and company itself, rather than any one person. That is to say, for the games that do have one particular person's name stamped on it, they tend to be far more eccentric and unique to warrant it. Take Hideo Kojima's or Toby Fox's out there. Their work has a very singular style to it that is wholly unlike anything else. Many people on the team point to a single person as to why it's like that. As much as I love Resident Evil and Pragmata and Monster Hunter, there is a singular peculiarity to, say, Yoko Taro's works that, even if they are of higher quality, I don't think they could truly replicate it. When I say that, I don't necessarily mean to ignore the work of the hundreds of other people who work on that project, but it's clear level of control that they have over it leads to a product that cannot be replicated by anyone else. Clearly, this is a proven thing because looking over at Square Enix, nearly their entire company is built on this foundation of multiple different creative divisions that are headed by specific devs and their own style of creation. In the end, I don't necessarily think one is clearly better than the other. When you want to make a consistent series, perhaps doing that team-based development works the best. But if you want something that is sure to wow and stand out from the crowd, maybe it's a bit too early to be firing your Yoshi Ps. And finally, the streaming conundrum. Since the beginning of video sharing on the internet, and especially YouTube, there has always been a sort of sore spot when it comes to recording your gameplay, putting commentary over it, and posting it online. In the beginning, this was mostly in the form of Let's Plays, and as that went on, developers made it known about their discontent with the practice. At first, it was rather small, but eventually the gaming genre of YouTube had grown so big it was an undeniable part of gaming culture. While Let's Plays themselves faded away, they continued on the form of streams, and perhaps grown into something even bigger, in a way that, for some games, can make or break them based on how much viral attention comes from it. At the same time, though, many doubt whether or not that they really contribute to a game's sales. As for any people out there, you might consider the fact that they watch the stream tantamount to playing the game in the first place. These days, there's a cooperative relationship between streamers and devs, and recently, a lot of Japanese developers have decided to speak out about their views on the matter as a whole. Naoki Hamaguchi, the director of the Final Fantasy VII Remake series, had commented on the phenomenon, stating that game creators need to sort of design around the fact that people can simply watch the game by creating things like branching storylines. His thoughts on it were making people actively think, would I do that in this situation? To convince them to then play the game. A take of essentially making each and every gameplay experience unique enough that it encourages any viewers to play it on their own. Another developer was the creator of Resident Evil, Shinji Mikami, who had stated in an interview with a Japanese streamer who is famous for playing Resident Evil games, that if the game itself did not manage to get the viewers to play the game, then it's the fault of the game itself. That the game was not engaging enough to warrant them playing. I believe that both of these comments hint towards an underlying part in this, that there's almost a rivalry between developers and streamers for players' attention when it comes to the game itself. Granted, I certainly think that some genres of games might be a bit harder to have this thought pattern to, but taking the stance of trying to be so fascinating that you force players to play the game is the kind of thing that would have never been around 20 years ago in the industry. I also believe that, in this way, it's almost like trying to capitalize on potential sales as well. Every player that sees a game from a streamer is someone who might one day play the game, and thus the game itself has to make a pitch to them that it's worth playing. At the same time, though, how many people watch a streamer who might have otherwise bought the game? I know for many this question is probably incredibly hazy. Without a doubt, streamers are an important part of marketing and PR of games today. And that will do it, guys, for this week's episode of Snowfall News. We'll be back again next week at the same time, same day. See you guys.